Okay, so before you get too far into this, well, let's start with Photoshop because we just saw that. So here's the pen tool. It's right here. Okay. Um, Remember, there's a couple different things in here, so make sure you have the pen tool selected, just the pen tool. Okay. Now, this is a hard one to learn because there's a lot of key commands, and I found this really cool website that helps you learn how to use these tools kind of intuitively. And I think I'll show it to you in a moment. I think I'll put it in the inspiration part of the module. But to begin with, just notice that, again, just like all of our tools, when we click on a tool, we get a bunch of stuff up at the top. Okay. So first off, you can see, I don't know really what that does. I'm not even going to worry about that. The main thing here is shape and path. Okay. I'm going to start with shape, and then I'm going to show you path in a moment. Okay. Um, when we do shape, what we're going to see is we're going to have a fill and we're going to have a stroke. Okay. And this is very similar to how Illustrator works. Okay. And in a lot of ways, this is a preferable way to work with making shapes. If we're going to do selections, we're probably going to want to do paths because paths don't have fills or strokes. They just have, they're empty, more like a selection. So we'll stick with shape to begin with. Okay, I think by default it might be at path, so watch out for that. Okay, we're going to do shape to start with. So notice that if I have this red line through here, that means that no stroke will show. I can do that with the fill too. So now nothing will show. It'll just be a path. Okay. Um, let's put that back to kind of a red color. Then here we have the size of the stroke, which is 20 pixels, and then you can play around with the stroke. So the stroke is the line on the outside of a path. One of the things to recognize when we're doing this kind of work is that you can change these strokes and fills after you make a shade. That's one of the qualities of using vector graphics, okay? So there's many qualities, and we'll kind of start to call them out. So one is that we can change the color and the stroke at any time. We can change the type of stroke that we have, and we can change the thickness after we do it, okay? Um, some heights and widths. Here we're going to have like, do we combine or, so this gets a little bit weird, but remember that this is similar to how those selections worked. Um, Here we have some lines and stuff like that. Here we have shapes to front and back, and these are all common sorts of qualities that vector graphics will use, and I'm not going to get too much into these things right here. I would suggest that you pay attention to the fact that auto add and delete is on, and that's a really nice feature, which means that we don't have to change the tool. Like I said, you for the most part, you can stay in the pen tool alone and do everything that you want to do without switching between tools. There's a little gear here so you can pick some options for how this thing works. Rubber band is turned on. You'll see how that works in a moment. And then, of course, there's a line to edges, and I'm just going to leave that on. Just what is it? There's a little explanation there. The pixel grid. So it is a little bit weird because in this case we are in a bitmap raster software using vector graphics. So whenever you do this sort of thing, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. Okay, so watch out for that a little bit. All right, let's just get to doing it, because really, in this case with the pen tool, it really boils down to practice, and that's really the way you're going to get good at it, is just practicing. So just to begin with, there's a couple ways to lay out. This is the rubber band, by the way, because it's showing the line as we go. So one of the first ways to start is just to click. And just notice that if I come to the end, it'll turn into this kind of icon. So if I keep clicking, it just keeps making points. But as I go to that very first, it turns into that circle, and that'll close a shape. And so now I'm back out of the tool. Do you see? So the tool is free. Can make another one. And notice that they are making new shapes. So I'm getting new shape layers, right? I made this heart earlier just so you can see that. But, so I'm making new shape layers. And just remember at the top, it was saying new. So if I can combine shapes, then now when I see I didn't make a new shape, it's actually in the same. So that's kind of what this is getting at up here, okay? Let's just delete that layer. I don't like that one. So when we're making an object, this is called a linear interpolation or linear curve, right? So linear meaning that there's no curvature; it's straight lines. Okay, we call that linear. If I want to edit this shape, I can, and that's where this starts getting a little bit more complicated because you have to get used to holding your command key or your option key or your shift key. So it's heavy on the modifying keys, okay? And that's what this website I'm going to show you is going to help you with, all right? But if I hold the command key, you'll see that the mouse, the cursor turns into this shape. Let me get a little bit. Cursor turns into this shape, which is actually right here. It's this thing. It's called the direct select tool. The path selection tool will select an entire path. See how the whole thing's selected? If I do direct select, though, I can select individual pieces. Okay, which is kind of cool. So I can edit individual nodes. But let's go back to that pen tool for a moment and just notice, okay, I'm in the pen tool. Oops, that was not the type. Let's go like this. And hold on, I'm all zoomed out. Okay, there we go. I'm going to hold down the command key. Now, if you're on a PC, that's going to be control, so watch out with those keys, right? So notice that it turns into that white arrow, and that white arrow is the direct select tool, okay? And I can click on another one, and I can move it. Now, sometimes you click on this and you get everything, right? Like when you click away, and then you click on it, it might want to take everything. So sometimes you go to move one and it moves everything. That's kind of, you just want to just undo, and you can undo these moves, right? That's okay. We can move these around, so I can reposition these, right? Now notice also that we have that auto add. So notice how it's wanting to add when I go over an edge. See that plus sign? And if I go over another one, it'll turn to subtract because we have those auto add and delete is on. So I can click that and it'll delete, or I can add. I can hold command and move it over. Now this one actually has a curve to it. I didn't expect that. I'm gonna take it out real quick and not talk about that for a moment. I want to keep it linear for a moment. So I can do all that. And move these around, edit them around. I can delete them, I can add them. Okay, this is all linear. So now let's talk about curvature. So this is the option key. So if I hold the option key, I'm going to get this tool, which is the convert points tool. And convert points is a really powerful tool. It's where we add curvature, but we can also take curvature out with it. So if you just click on a point and drag, you'll see you get curvature. Now I can do this or this, and you guys might remember from that example, this kind of looks a lot like those shapes, right? Those little handles coming off. And I get curvature. So now I didn't draw that line. The computer drew that line. It knows there's a point here, it knows there's a point here, and it knows there's a point here. So that's 0, 1, and 2, you could call that, right? And it's defining the curvature across those. If I hold the option key again and I click on this, so notice that it turns into that tool again. This is the convert point tool. So now if I click on, just do one click, it converts it back into a linear curve, okay? If I hold command, I can drag it out again. Now if I don't want to lose that curve and I want to move it, remember you hold command. So it is a little bit challenging to use these tools because you're having to really get used to use your key commands. And I found that all of these things are what really throw people off. First of all, it's math. Second of all, you have to use your keys a lot on your keyboard, and you have to remember which ones are which. And then it's just really awkward to use. I mean, it's just an awkward tool. It's in some ways, I say it's intuitive in that you don't need to like do mathematical equations, but um, and it is visually, you're managing it visually, but it still is a little challenging for people. And so, take your time with it and really don't try to get overly thoughtful about it in the first part. Just kind of start to make some shapes and just go for it. Let me zoom out a little bit and then let's talk about, okay, so let's make a new shape path. But this time I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. So you'll see a lot of people do this. Like if you watch videos, you'll see a lot of people click and drag. I just totally clicked more than one. And I'll click and I'll drag. And then I'll click and I'll drag. And I'll click and I'll drag. And they tend to click and drag a lot. And I have found in my experience that this doesn't work as well for me. And right now we're just drawing shapes and it doesn't really matter what shape I made there, but I'm not a big fan of clicking and dragging and I tend to not do that. But you'll see a lot of people do this and I'll show you my method as opposed to their method. But you can click and drag. So let's undo that. And you get curves when you do that, right? So I can click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and click and drag. So I'm actually curving as I go. And if I go on the last one and click and drag, it'll actually curve that last one too. So I didn't do that on the last one, it stayed linear. And you can get these really nice roundy shapes, right? And it works well. Some people prefer that method, and you'll see why in a little bit. Now I can also check this out. I can click and I can drag, and then I can click and I can drag, but watch what happens if I hold the Alt key. Watch what happens. It'll actually break the handle on one side. Look at that. And so now when I let go, it's going to change how the curve responds after this. So watch how now when I let go, do you see how it wants to now go this way? And so some people get really good at this, and they actually can, they know where they want these curves to go. To me, I feel like this just makes it a little bit more difficult. I didn't drag when I did that. Because you're just kind of in my opinion, it's overthinking things. It's just too hard to figure out exactly what you want to do. But I'm just going to finish this one out. So that's a cool tool because when we click and drag, we let go, and you'll see in the game also this little thing I'm going to show you. They want you to try to do this. You're going to click and drag, and then you're going to hold Option, and you're going to move that one around. And just notice if I make this thing go horizontal like that, and let's say I want to make this go straight now, linear. If I come straight off this, you see how that became a linear shape, and now I can come straight off this. Another thing to pay attention to is if you're doing straights, you can hold Shift. Do you see how Shift is locking this down? Like if I hold Shift, it'll go straight down. It also will go in angles, so that's 45. So I can make these really straight lines. And then I'm going to come straight off here. And then I'm going to click on the last one, and then I'll just round it out. And so now I have linear lines and curved lines, right? So there's a lot of options to how to use this, and again, a lot of it comes down to preference and what makes sense to you, and there's a lot of reasons to change up different decisions. This is making shapes. We're not even making paths right now, so in a moment we'll do paths. Remember, I can take this out. So one of the things let's talk about real quickly is how many of these do you want? Like that's really one of the big questions is how many do you want to do this with? So if I hold, if I click this out, right? So notice I'm going to try and get this exact same shape without that point. So now watch. I'm going to take this end here, and I'm going to, can't actually remember what it looked like, I'll be honest, but I'm just going to guess. And then I'm going to click on this one and watch. I'm going to grab this one, and I can make that round. and then I'll take this one, remember, and if I make it straight, remember I can hold shift and it'll go straight, perfectly straight. So now this edge is linear again, and now I can just keep playing with these two until I get that roundy shape. And what you'll find is that the best round shapes you can get actually will have the fewest points along them. Okay, I don't think that looks exactly like I had it, but I'm not going to worry about it. The point being is that I probably could get it to look identical if I took my time with it, right? And I'm not following anything, so I can't remember exactly how I had it, but I can get a pretty perfect curve right there, and it'll look really sweet and awesome. Okay, so that's the general gist. One other thing you could think about is like the handles represent the angle that the curve is going to start at. So if you kind of notice, like the angle sort of, the curve starts at an angle and then it's trying to match the next angle. So it's coming in. If you notice, it's sort of coming in at a little bit of a bend. If I come straight up, it's coming straight in, and then I can come linear straight at it. And then I can get these negative curves as well, right? And so it's really, if you look at the very end of the curve, it's actually in the angle of the handle. And of course, the length of the handle also, it's the strength of that, right? You see that? So as I come all the way close, all the way in, it becomes basically the angle doesn't matter anymore because it's a zero strength. And as I come out, I get more and more and more strength. Okay. Let me come out here. Here's another one to do. We'll make another shape. This is a fun one. Can you make a perfect circle with just 2 points? Because oftentimes what you see is you'll see people make circles like this. They'll do this sort of thing. I'm just going to I'm not going to make a good one, but with 4 points, right? Can I do that with less than 4 points? So here, let's actually combine the shapes. So what if you did 1, and I'll hold shift, 2, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to snap right back on the other one. See this? I'm going to drag. It's kind of important to do that drag. And then I'm going to hold the Alt key. And then hold the Alt key. Now they should be perfectly straight is one thing, and they should be exactly the same length. And if they're exactly the same length and they're perfectly straight, I should get basically a perfect circle. Right? So as you can see, that's 2 anchor points. There's 2 anchor points there, and I'm getting a circle. So that's always a fun one to try and build up. I guess technically I made 3 clicks, but it looks like 2 anchor points. And I think when the second one or the third one was put there, it kind of combined with this first one. So I think it is really two anchor points. And so that's always fun to try and do. Can you make that actually work that way? Now I haven't turned on the stroke. Let's turn on the stroke. Do a nice cyan. 20 pixels. Right? You can play around with that. You can do the dashed line. Looks kind of funny with 20 pixels. Let's bring that down maybe. Let's see more of that, right? It's kind of a cool effect, right? You can get some pretty nice looking stuff this way. It doesn't look like that's a perfect circle to me, quite frankly, but I'm not going to worry about that. But that's a kind of a fun one to kind of try to do, and you can get some cool looks this way. Okay, now let's really get into one that's really defined. Okay, now the classic is the heart. Okay, and I'm going to show you how I would do the heart. Okay, I would just make 4 points, and notice how I'm not being really too careful about that. Let's turn the stroke back off so we don't see that. Notice how I'm not being really overly. Oops, I didn't really want that one. I'm not being overly thoughtful about my placement right now. but I'm just going to place some out. Okay, now I'm going to hold down the Command key, and I'm going to, oops, see, that's what I was talking about, where it grabs all of them. Do you see that? Just be careful. Just click on one and then move it, right? So if that happens to you, just don't just relax and it'll come back. Just gonna kind of make like I always think of this kind of as an arrow or a flying V or something, like, because there's these kinds of guitars that do this. This kind of small heart. Let's maybe make it a little bit bigger. Now I find myself a little bit. I tend to I like the linear lines a little bit more, like that. Now that I have this set up, the one thing I know is I probably want this one to stay linear. This one's going to stay linear. These ones will round, and then I'll also round the bottom one too. So now I'm going to hold Option. Um, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other. Watch out for this where you cross over, by the way. Do you see that? You want to watch out for that kind of thing. If you don't undo, remember you can just hold the Convert tool and just click it back to linear and then make the curve again. Now I've gotten a little bit of resistance calling this a perfect heart or whatever. I don't know. It's going for the classic kind of Valentine's heart style heart. And you'll see this. This is actually a really common pen tool tutorial because it's a pretty easy shape to generate, and but it's also kind of hard for people to do. It seems like it'll be easy at first, but then it kind of you start getting really you start tweaking on it a bit. The idea would be that if you were to cut this thing in half and fold it over, both sides would be identical. And that's really, let's just put it that way. You want to make this one side be identical to the other. One thing you'll notice is that these lines right here, these two anchor points should be at the same height, and they also should be the same. I'm gonna hold Shift and holding Command and Shift, which I can select both at the same time to see that. They should be at the same angles, and they should be about the same length. Okay. A couple more things to do, so what we'll do is we'll convert this bottom one, and I'm gonna, usually this is where people stop, but I'm gonna do one more convert. I'm gonna actually go a little bit wide like this. Remember, if you hold Shift, it goes flat, which is kind of nice. And then I'm gonna hold the convert tool, and I'm gonna grab this side, and I'm gonna make a reverse angle. So it actually kind of reverses slightly, so it's sort of more of a dip there, right here. So it kind of comes to even a harder point. Okay. Kind of want this one to come down a little bit, so sort of, I don't like that actually. And now let's talk about these other handles, right? So if I click on this one now, and I want to move this, so watch what happens if I grab this one and I'm holding Command. It'll rotate both of them. Do you see that? But it'll only lengthen the curvature of one. So the strength on this side is different than the strength on the other. So notice that when you come back in there, that that's going to happen. It'll still move its position, but now I've kind of lost the strength, and I kind of want those to be equal for this type of curve, right? So if I want to get that back, and just click on the Convert tool and just do it one more time. And remember, we can hold Command, so we get our direct select, Shift, which will multiple select, which is kind of nice. So now I can see the differences between the two. So now I can say, for instance, hold my Command key and maybe match the angle. I want to be careful though that I don't do that, make it long, right? Because then I'm going to get a weird shape there, right? So if you lose that, I think I just added a point there. If you lose that, again, convert it back and then just pull it out. I think that actually this one's a little long here now, so I'm just gonna convert it and let's go back. And what I would suggest is you just play with this and just kind of keep messing with them a little bit and getting them to the point that you like it. And I know it seems like kind of not the biggest deal, but this is what I want. I want to see a heart from you. So you're going to actually make a save on this. You're going to do, we do save as. Notice I haven't talked about export. Let's do an export real quick because you haven't done that maybe. I'm going to do export as. Kind of like the export as because we can change our pixel sizes, right? So for instance, let's not make it. Actually, let me cancel that. Let's do a scale on this. I'm gonna just come out of this tool, and I'm gonna do Command T, right? Sorry, I'm zooming all over. Command T, and that, I'm not on that shape layer. Command T. Because the selected portion of path does not enclose any pixels, so I can't actually scale it. Can I scale it? I wanted to show a scale issue. There we go. I can select it as a path and scale it. The point I'm trying to make here is that when you scale a path, you don't get any distortions. If we turn that into a rastered version of this, I'll rasterize this layer, and if I start changing this thing around, like I'll make it small. Right there. Let's hide that right there. Make this small, it's fine. It's not gonna have a problem with that. It's pretty okay when you make it small, but let me make it a little bit bigger again. See how the side is getting pixelated? Let me even make that smaller. Let's make it really small. Okay, really small. I'll hit return, accept it. Now I'll make it larger. That's what I'm talking about. See how it gets really pixelated? That's a rastered image. So raster images, bitmap images, get pixels, okay? If we do that for this one, right, remember I go to my, I'll go to my pen tool and I'll just hold command. Not on that layer, sorry. I'll do just a big marquee, oh, forgot to hold command again. Trying to do all this in the, without going into that tool, I don't know why, but I'll just hold command and drag over those. And now if I do command T, I'll make this really small, just like I did before. I'll accept that. Okay. If we click away, you'll see it looks good. Okay, I'm gonna select it again. Did it again the same way, so just select that whole thing, and I'm gonna scale it up really big again, and you see that the edge of this thing stays perfect. Again, that's another one of the qualities of a vector graphic is that you don't have, there's never an issue with zoom or scaling because the line is actually defined by math. It's not defined by pixels, it's defined by math. Remember, there's just a path going across here, and so it's a mathematical equation that's creating the shape rather than pixels. And so it doesn't really matter what scale it is. It can be any scale, which is kind of cool. And that's one of the qualities of a vectored graphic. A lot of maps are going to use vectors. A lot of things use all the text uses these. So it's a real common tool for things that you're going to want to scale a lot. I'm going off on that. So it's an important thing to recognize, okay? You don't need to really, sorry, I'm grabbing text tool. You don't really need to do that, but I wanted you guys to see some scaling, and it is an important aspect to this, so you can see that. Okay, let's do the export as, because, sorry, went off on that. I wanted to kind of big, because, you know, so look at the size here. This is a pretty cool little export as a dialog box. We can go PNG, we can do JPEG, we can do GIF or GIF, depending on how you say that. We've been doing a lot of JPEGs. Let's do PNG. Now, typically, PNGs are for graphics, and usually when we talk about graphics, we are usually talking about vectors. You know, there's a lot of reasons, you know, to get into that. We'll maybe and near the end of the semester, we'll start talking a little bit more about formatting because it's kind of esoteric, but it's good to know a little bit about. And then here I can do something like scale. I've actually been doing this a lot in our class because my images, like especially when I do a camera image, it's going to be like 5,000 pixels or something, and I want to put it on the canvas page. It's going to be huge. So I might just do a percentage change. You know, it makes it a little bit smaller. Or I could do even bigger. Now in this case, you might actually see a little bit of pixelation. I'm not sure. Or 50. And 960 pixels is a fairly good size, so that's okay. It's going to be PNG. And you know, you can play around with different things. It's kind of cool though when you do this sort of thing, you can start to see how like maybe a smaller file might affect this. You know, if you do JPEG, you know, and you start messing around with, say, for instance, the quality, and you really bring it down to say 20%, like I bet you anything this is going to look identical at 10% as opposed to 100%. And again, this is format and qualities and stuff and compressions are something that we will talk about because they are important, but don't get too into it. But just notice that 427 kilobytes, if I go down to a quality of 10, it's 8.4 kilobytes. And again, not all of you understand kilobytes or any of those sorts of things, and that's fine. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but just it's kind of cool that you can tell that this doesn't really change at all. Mostly because it's a very simple object and there's only one color. So I'm going to keep it at the PNG 50%, export all. Let's go to my desktop. I don't want to go to my desktop. I'll go to my output, call it heart. And that's export. A couple new things here, right? So you don't have to use export if you don't want to. That's fine. But it's cool to start looking at it, and we'll keep bringing that up now because you're getting more advanced. So that's the heart image. I'm going to stop there, and then we'll come back and talk about paths and then that tool.